From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell and I'm in my apartment in Mount Maunganui, which is in the north of the North Island of New Zealand. I'm here for England's men's two-match test series, which they've just started against the Black Caps. And yeah, I'm in Mount Maunganui, which is on a peninsula in the north of the North Island, and not too far away from the areas which have been badly affected by Cyclone Gabriel. It seems remarkable that Mount Maunganui has escaped any real damage here, and hence why the test match is going on. But there are really parts of New Zealand that are going to feel these effects for some time to come. But we've certainly seen a fast-paced opening day of this test match, that is for sure.
Yes, Ali, Jim Maxwell here in Sydney, and I've been following the first day with England again, rollicking their way through to a declaration. It's pink ball test cricket at its best. 4 hours of batting and then 2 hours of bowling. Should be a fun game. Here in Australia, well, we're trying to sort of think about hopefully an improvement in the second test for Australia against India in Delhi. That might be wishful thinking, but all eyes were diverted this week to the women's Premier League auction in India, which has made some amateur cricketers, as they've been for a long while, a little bit wealthier, it seems, as a result of what occurred at that. So good luck to all of them.
Well, isn't it remarkable that even here in India, women's cricket and all the goings-on of the WPL have almost overshadowed the India-Australia series? Impossible to do that, though, but we'll see how that test match goes. This is Charu Sharma for All India Radio, back in Bangalore after a wonderful, happy trip to Rajasthan to assist my school in revamping and renewing and sort of rejigging their sports program, the Mayor College of Ajmer, but glad to be back. And, of course, it's all women now. It's either the T20 World Cup news, where India have started out very well, and, of course, the WPL, where some wonderful fortunes are finally being made. It's about time.
Well, you've both mentioned the WPL, and you're right, it has dominated, hasn't it? It was taking headlines. Even Owen Morgan announcing his retirement from all forms of cricket was overlooked. You know, the WPL was leading the headlines above that. That was probably an announcement that it was going to be coming sooner or later. So we will delve more into that first ever auction, because it felt like a really momentous moment, not just for women's cricket, but women's sports overall. So the auction took place in Mumbai, and there really was some life-changing amounts of money spent on some of the game's top stars. The first ever pick was India's Smriti Mandhana, the opener. She went to Royal Challengers Bangalore for $412,000 US. That was the biggest deal of the day. Some of the other top buys, we saw India's Deepti Sharma and Jemima Rodriguez go for big amounts, and Australia's Ash Gardner and England's Nat Sciver-Brunt were the two biggest overseas picks. So, Charu, let's come to you first, because it's India's tournament. I mean, can you put into, I guess, a sense of perspective as to the significance of this for women's sport in India?
Well, you mentioned it's India's tournament, and technically it is, but I think it is the tournament for women in the whole world right now, with the kind of figures being bandied about. I mean, it's just finally happened, because that was the key. We've been talking about the event happening for years here on Stumped, and the one thing that we thought might be holding it back was the lack of depth in the home country, in India. But judging from the interest of, the commercial interest and the media interest, this is just fabulous. I think the timing is just right, because the women have started doing really well in international cricket. There's lots of news as well surrounding the women, even when they're not playing. So, yeah, the amounts might seem outstanding at this point of time, but I really think it's their due. And with the kind of player purse that every team has, these were along expected lines. So terrific for all the women who were the top bids. And, of course, even more important in the long-term sense, there's so many other young Indians now are a part of the WPL, and this is where the depth will now start arising in India. And that's just the best news from the Indian standpoint. I hope the rest of the world is not disappointed with some of the figures, because some have got very their due, and others, strangely, and this is how auctions work, and I've said that before, they're like wild, untamed animals. Sometimes when you come up a little late, people don't have the budget. So it's just one of those things. But I mean, congratulations to everybody who now is a part of the WPL.
Yeah, Jim, the Australians really took a huge step forward, leading the way with the Women's Big Bash League. But that made a lot of players, a lot of depth in players professional in Australia. But this takes it to another level in terms of the money that's available.
Yeah, I suppose it's going to put the squeeze on things like the 100 with this kind of bidding going on. And we shouldn't overlook the fact that it's appalling, the discrimination, that there are no Pakistanis involved, just like the men's IPL. I think that's very unfair, and something needs to be done about that. And Charu, anyone can tell you about the political reasons for this, even though the Pakistanis were there for the first year of the men's IPL, but haven't been there since, and the women are not there at all. It might be a question to Charu, if there were Pakistani players put up for auction, how many of them you reckon would have qualified, given that there were over 400 players initially put up, as it were, for auction?
Well, the fact is that the T20 World Cup is going on right now, and although India beat Pakistan in a bit of a thriller, at least the bidding public in India, the team owners, would be well aware of the strength of at least a half dozen of the top Pakistan players, and were they to be a part of the auction, I have no doubt that at least 6 or 7 would have been picked, which is at least one per team or so. That's my guess, but of course we'll never know, not at this point of time. You make a good point about the fact that they're missing, and it's a shame, but I do hope that relations improve soon enough for both men and women, and that they can be a part of cricket happening around the world, every single country. There is the matter of the World Cup later on, and there's some noise about the men's Pakistan team perhaps not coming to India and so on and so forth, but that's all in the future. One feels sorry for all the hardworking women of Pakistan to not have the opportunity to not only play this kind of a very salient league, but also, of course, make a reasonable livelihood. Yeah,
and that's very much a political decision that India has made and is sticking with, isn't it? The wealth is, it's felt huge, hasn't it, the tournament? And as you said, Charu, tournament for the world. But you're quite right, Jim, when you look at actually the number of players who put themselves up for the auction versus the number that actually get picked. And I'm sure it is going to be a tournament that will expand in future, as we've seen the men's IPL add teams. At the moment, it's quite a concentrated number, in fact, isn't it, of players who will be picked, which still leaves a lot of players within a team not picking up these bigger sums of money. It's not quite the game changer across the board yet, but it's a game changer in terms of opportunity. That opportunity is there for all those players who can enter the auction to put themselves forward. So it's a huge thing to aspire to.
It is, but it becomes a bit of we're going to take that one, so that means we might be able to go for this one, and that's why you get situations at the moment anyway, where people like Alana King miss out completely, and she's not the only one. But that's often the process, as it has been in the men's IPL, where some players miss out completely, and you shake your head and say, how did that come about? But Charu might be more aware of the ins and outs of the process. That means all of a sudden someone's stranded because the selectors, as it were, have decided to bid for someone else, and they bid so much money they can't afford to go there.
It is like a wild, untamed animal, an auction, and it depends so much on luck as well. When do you come up for auction? And sometimes people, especially in the early parts, overspend, and some really good players, therefore, are the bidding kind of is insipid, and this is just how auctions go.
Jim, you mentioned Alana King not being picked up, and she was certainly a surprise for me. Although sometimes leg spinners haven't always been a favoured pick in T20, but they can be so valuable, and she's been an excellent player. Were there any more surprises for you out of the auction, either the picks or the prices, or others who were left out?
Well, I noticed in our background briefing for the show, there's a name there that stands out to me every time I watch her play for South Africa, Laura Voldvat. I don't know how anyone could leave her out. She's one of the best players in women's cricket by a long shot. And it was interesting to see also in the notes that Dane van Niekerk was picked up for $37,000. So good luck to her, because she suffered a bit of humiliation and embarrassment on that selection criteria that forced her out of the South African team. But there were a number of others there who missed out. I think the interesting thing is the comparative pay rate for women's cricketers to stars in other women's sports. And that's worth looking at, Ali.
Well, for a lot of players who did get picked up in the auction, they're suddenly going to be in possession of a bigger payslip than any of them could ever have imagined, provided, of course, they can fulfill their contract and don't get injured. But if you look at, say, Ash Gardner and Nat Siver-Brunt, well, they're going to be earning 10 times more than the highest salary in the Women's 100, the ECB tournament, just to put that in some perspective. They're also going to earn more in 1 month than Australian footballer or soccer player Sam Kerr pockets in a whole season with Chelsea, and more than the WNBA's top earner Jackie Young. So it is a watershed moment for the sport, albeit concentrated amongst a relatively small number of players, as we mentioned, when you're considering the global game. But you do need to look after your finances. So let's speak to Ben Gibson, who's Director of Financial Planning at UK-based wealth management business Evelyn. Ben, welcome to Stumped. Just tell us, first of all, a little bit more about what you do specifically.
Yeah, so what we do at Evelyn is we help individuals from all walks of life really plan for their financial future. Now, what I do is specialise in sports and entertainment work and work with sports and entertainment clients. And naturally, their careers are extremely uncertain and potentially very, very short-lived. So what we do is help these individuals get set for life beyond sport. So that could be from a significantly younger age than the likes of us in the room at the moment.
Yeah, and if we look at some of the earners in the WPL, well, some of them are maybe only 18 years of age, but also across many different countries as well. So what should players be thinking about if they are suddenly in receipt of a big payday such as this? And I imagine that approach, would be quite different depending on the country you come from and indeed your background.
Exactly, yeah. So when we're thinking about different countries of residence, that would really be focused around the level of taxation that they pay and how much they end up with in their back pocket. But the type of work that we look to do with individuals like this is somebody who's 18, 19. You're trying to get them to think about how short their career may be, even if they are extremely successful. So a lot of these individuals may be retiring from sport at age 35, and their period of earnings may be 15, 20 years at a push. And what you're trying to do in an ideal world is get them set up for potentially 60 years worth of retirement, which is extremely hard to achieve. But first and foremost, it's great to see the additional level of money now coming into female sports. I think it's something that we have seen historically in the men's game of cricket. But in the female side, as you've said, it's great to see that level of change. Historically, and we're not too far away from the past where individuals were working alongside playing sport, and now they're doing it at a professional level. So it allows them to then focus more energy and focus more time to the game that they love, but also they can start thinking about, can they plan for a career beyond sport if they need to?
Jim Maxwell here, Ben, in Sydney. It sounds like it's a bit like winning the lottery or something. So what the players need to be wary of so that they don't have all this income scammed from them?
I think the bigger picture is trying to get them to understand the value of that money and how, although 1 year might be great, how there is no guarantees around that being paid out to them for the rest of their careers. We don't know what will happen in terms of performance, and that's the biggest hurdle I think you have to get over when working with athletes is that they expect this money to last forever. If you spend it or you spend a big chunk of it very, very quickly, it won't last very long. So the type of work that we do is very educational, really. So yes, we will help them position their money in the most, I suppose, secure way that fits their circumstances. But ultimately, we're trying to give them a pot of money that they can call upon when they're old enough to sort of think about the life beyond sport.
Hi, this is Charu Sharma from
Hi,
Bangalore. And do you think it's different in some major way for men and women athletes? And do you also sense, generally speaking, a great reluctance for athletes to go in for these well-crafted plans rather than, well, just leave me alone?
I think it's generally at an individual level. So if I think about men's football as an example, men's football has historically had a really bad reputation around individuals being extremely flash with their money. Now, the type of individuals that we work with generally aren't like that. They're generally not like that. And what I can't give you the answer to is whether that's because they work with us or whether they're naturally down-to-earth individuals. And I think it's only the bad examples that you hear in the media of people being very flash and spending money on cars and lifestyles that maybe give the whole industry a bad reputation. Now, I think it's possibly too early to say with regards to female and male athletes and whether they would act differently with the same amount of money. But as I've said, I think the starting point is engagement, working with whether it's managers, agents, lawyers, accountants who work with these individuals to really get them set up on the right foot. And that's from a geography point of view, it doesn't really matter where they're based. I think it's more about understanding what their long-term aspirations are for that money. And we used an example, I think, in a case recently of, would an individual who's 19 rather earn £1 million in 1 year or £100,000 for 10 years? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is tap into the psychology of that individual. There's no right or wrong answer. Everybody wants different things. And some people in particular are looking for security. And that's the type of individual who reaches out to us, really.
Can we all earn £1 million a year for 20 years, please? Because that would be quite handy.
Yeah, everybody wants that, really. Yes,
yeah.
Bring it on.
Ben, it's really good to get your insights. Thank you so much for joining us on Stumped. And it certainly is going to be a changing landscape for women in sports, but women cricketers in particular. Thanks for being with us.
No problem. Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. So don't forget you can follow us on Twitter. We're at BBCWS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And check us out on YouTube as well. Go to the BBC World Service's YouTube channel and you'll find us there. My thanks to Charu Sharma, Jim Maxwell, and to all of you for listening. Speak to you next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.